Assemble! Stay dandy, baby. Sometimes it's good to be bad, and that's the name of the game in the latest episode of My Hero Well, you know what? Excuse me. It's My Villain Academia this week. They even actually changed the main title in the intro. That's right. The villains are coming out to play, and it looks like Tomura Shigaraki and the League of Villains are going to be going to war with Re-Destro and his Meta Liberation Army. I really feel like this is the episode that Season 5 has been waiting to give us. A really big, massive conflict between two differing villainous ideologies, and I think it's going to be pretty damned exciting. But before we go further into the review, I would really appreciate it if you guys would like this video. Subscribe to the channel for more content just like this one, reviews, discussions, the weekly podcast, the Powerful Nerdcast, all that good stuff. If you want to go that little extra mile, though, please make sure to check out my Patreon. Make a monthly donation, a small one, and remember, first-time donators, I'll review an anime series of your choosing. Now, while I'm definitely going to be talking about My Villain Academia this week, I am also going to be including my review from the last episode of the series because I didn't get a chance to do it. Or, really, I didn't get a chance to edit it. I actually did record it, and you're actually going to see that first in this video, and then we're going to come back to this review. So, you ready? Steady? Here we go. The villains are returning to the forefront of My Hero Academia, and it is definitely rocking my jollies. Hello, my friends, and welcome to another review of the My Hero Academia anime series. But let's go ahead and jump into this episode right here, which was just edge-of-your-seat tense, as we got a pretty massive reveal about a classic villain from the series. A villain that I've always really enjoyed for the visual display that he was. And I'm talking about Kurogiri, the Shadow Man. He's a character who's been around since the very first season of My Hero Academia, but for the last couple of seasons, he's been locked up in Tartarus. He's been in jail. But we get a massive reveal about his character. Now, before Kurogiri, to me, was basically just a man with a really unique quirk. It is revealed in this episode that he's actually a Nomu who was created by a mad scientist who is revealed in this episode who looks suspiciously similar to the one who told Deku at the beginning of the series that he has no quirk and will never have a quirk. I'm not sure if this is just a coincidence or anything, or maybe that doctor was evil since the beginning. It can't be a coincidence. They look way too similar to one another. The point is, this doctor is the one who's been creating all of these Nomus, and essentially Kurogiri is kind of like a super advanced version of one. I mean, I only say that because all of the Nomus that we've seen before were basically giant hulking monsters with exposed brains, but Kurogiri is different. He's a little more refined. He seems a lot more intelligent, and his entire goal was basically to be the caretaker of Tomura Shigaraki. And we get to see that while he is locked up, he is very, very dedicated to the League of Villains, as he is giving up no information whatsoever. That is until they decide to bring in Eraserhead and Present Mic. Now, the reason that they do this is because they are led to believe that Kurogiri, this super advanced Nomu, was actually created from the corpse of their old, dead classmate. A character that they've never really brought up before, as far as I know. A character who goes by the name of Oboro Shirakumo. Now, Shirakumo was an old classmate of Eraserhead and Present Mic. Back in the day, they were young friends in school, and they had dreams of one day starting their very own hero agency. And in one crazy event, which they don't go into too much detail of, essentially, Shirakumo was killed. He was destroyed by all of this rubble, which completely crushed his body, and there was no way that he was going to survive. But everybody who's involved with the investigation with Kurogiri thinks that maybe he could be, because his powers are very similar to him. And don't you just love the visual of the fact that Oboro Shirakumo basically was like white fog and everything, and then you have Kurogiri who's like black fog. It's a perfect representation of how he has basically turned to darkness, although it's not exactly him. It's more just his body, which has been infused with all of this other crazy stuff, which makes him look really evil. And this is why Eraserhead and Present Mic have been brought in, as they're the two people who were closest to him when he was alive, and they might be able to get some information about the League of Villains, and where these Nomus are being created, and maybe something that the heroes can work with to try and take these guys down. And this scene was nothing short of terrifying and heartbreaking. What I thought was really remarkable about it is the fact that Present Mic is a character who's always really loud and crazy, And Eraserhead is a character who's very quiet and calm and collected for the most part, despite the fact that he looks strung out all the freaking time. But during this entire scene, we get to see that the roles were kind of reversed, with Present Mike sort of losing his cool and not being able to sort of like control himself and being very quiet, and Eraserhead just being very loud and emotional, more than I think we've ever seen him throughout the course of the entire series. And he's desperately trying to bring out Shirakumo's real personality inside of this Nomu, and by the end of the episode, after a lot of basically just yelling at him and telling him about how he's raising the current level of the students at UA High, it manages to actually bring out a little bit of Shirakumo's personality. He starts to sort of manifest out of Kurogiri's weird black fog, and he's only able to utter basically a single word, which is hospital. And this is basically all the heroes need to learn a little bit more about the League of Villains and where these creatures are being created and maybe more secrets about them. And then we immediately hard cut to a hospital, which features that doctor I mentioned earlier, and he is currently experimenting on Tomura right now, doing some sort of intense shock therapy. I don't know what the fuck he's doing, but the point is, it's very obvious that this mad Dr. Eggman-esque doctor is the one who's been creating these Nomus, and he's very obsessed with it. Point is, this was a pretty important freaking episode in the grand scheme of things, and it looks like it's really going to kick into high gear in the next episode. It looks like the League of Villains are coming back to the forefront of the story, and I'm very excited for that. In fact, the name of the next episode is called My Villain Academia, which I think is just so damn cool. I love that. It looks like they're also going to be bringing back the character of Gigantomachia, that really big giant monster dude that Gran Torino and the other guys were fighting against, who's incredibly destructive. I don't know if they're going to try and bring him back into the League of Villains or what's going on with that, but it seems like they're building up to something really massive here, and who knows what the rest of this like season is actually going to bring. But damn it, I am along for the ride and I am excited. So what's the rundown on this episode of My Hero Academia? To me, this was one of the best episodes of the season. Not to knock the first half, which was basically just a combination of, you know, competition between the students and character development and getting to see the characters go through their whole training and everything. But I've been waiting for the story to come back, if you know what I mean. The bigger elements of My Hero Academia, and it seems like it's finally starting to come to fruition here, which has just got me all sorts of pumped up to see what's next, especially with the League of Villains, who I think are a fantastic group of bad guys, and I just want to learn more about them. I want to spend more time with them. I love villain-centric episodes, and this is a series that certainly has a colorful bunch, so I'm excited for that. But I really liked this backstory of learning that Kurogiri was a Nomu and that he was created from the body of an old hero that was connected to two of the biggest ones in the entire series. And I'm glad that we got to see some flashback sequences of Eraserhead and Present Mike when they were younger. They're basically almost the same in many ways, but the death of their friend Shirakumo, you can definitely tell, had a massive effect on their characters, and getting to see the shock on their faces as they actually realized this when they were speaking to Kurogiri is nothing short of terrifying, to say the least. And what I love about it too is it makes me want to go back and watch those first seasons to see that big moment where the League of Villains came in at the very end and started attacking all the students at UA High. I want to see more of like Kurogiri's reactions to seeing them, like if this is something that was planned from the beginning or something that sort of just, you know, he's like, you know what, I'm going to turn him into a Nomu and see what actually happens. But it makes me realize that if there's one Nomu out there like Kurogiri who's like this advanced in terms of intelligence and power, there could be more out there. There's a lot of possibility for more of the crazy Nomu they're going to create, not to mention even more villains. There's some big promise here, so I'm just very pumped for all of that. Production value-wise, this was not the best-looking episode of the series, and I only say that because there were a couple scenes here of watching the characters like walk through a hallway that just had no fucking detail in them. There's no other way to put it. It looked like shit. Then again, this was not a big, over-the-top, action-looking episode, but I'm not going to excuse the episode for that. I think there were a lot of opportunities for them to make this episode look a lot better than it had to be. There were certainly moments that looked good, but I mean, again, it was mostly just watching characters talk. But if you're going to have characters moving or walking, put a little fucking work into it. Put some detail. I mean, look at this screenshot. This is ass. Just come on, just work a little harder. That's all I ask. Again, it doesn't completely diminish my love of this episode, which I certainly did enjoy quite a bit. If only getting to see a more vulnerable side of Eraserhead, something we don't get to see too often because he's such a dark, gruff Batman type of superhero. So it's kind of interesting to sort of like see that side of him, to see that sad, vulnerable side. I mean, he cried in this episode. It was just intense, to say the least. So, a few bad animation and artwork moments, but otherwise, I think story-wise, this is one of the more tense and awesome episodes of the season. And again, it looks like it's about to kick off a massive, big finale for the season, so I'm very excited for all that good stuff. So, yeah, I liked this one a lot, but some of the animation moments just brought it down for me. And the fact of the matter is, not that much happened, but what happened had a tremendous amount of weight behind it. So, I'm going to give this episode a 4 out of 5. And now we're traveling to the present, and here we are back again at My Villain Academia. I was really pumped for this episode, and it's already starting to deliver on something very exciting. And I really got pumped up when I got to see in the intro they actually changed the name of the series from My Hero Academia to My Villain Academia. I wish they would have gone maybe a little bit further with it, but it certainly gives me vibes of seeing what they would do with the JoJo's Bizarre Adventure openings, where whenever like a major event would happen with the villain, they would start to reinsert them into the intro and sort of mess with the minds of the viewers just a little bit more. And I was kind of hoping they would go a little further with that, but still, just the fact that they're actually calling it My Villain Academia, I think is really freaking awesome. And this is where things start to get really interesting, as this truly does focus on the League of Villains themselves, in particular, Tomura Shigaraki. We actually get to get that weird sort of recap from the last episode where we were introduced to this crazy mad scientist, one of the followers of All for One, and we get to see that he's been experimenting on Tomura Shigaraki in order to get him a lot more powerful, but we get to see the events that basically lead up to this like massive moment, where we get to see that essentially Tomura has been given this mission from Kurogiri in order to obtain a brand new power, and that's going to involve actually going after Gigantomachia, that one super destructive, giant, horrifying man who pretty much just destroys everything in his wake. They really firmly establish that this guy is just unfreaking stoppable, because as amazing as Tomura is and the other League of Villain members, they just can't seem to take this guy down, and we even get to see that over the course of a couple of months, they try to actually bring him down, and this is all a challenge which has also been issued by that one mad scientist who is going to go along with Tomura's plan, which apparently is just to destroy and fuck up everything. This is all tied to his very messed up backstory, which they're slowly but surely starting to get into. We've already seen hints of it before, with him being discovered by All for One, and the fact that apparently Tomura killed his entire family, and that was with his crazy disintegrating quirk. But we also get to see like the origin of like those weird hands that he always seems to wear around him. They're not fake. They're totally real, and they belong to all of his dead family members, which is insanely disturbing to say the least. And that's sort of like what happens when he like wears them. It sort of like builds upon his overall rage and everything, and it's just disturbing in the craziest way possible. It's amazing that the show, as bright and bubbly as it can be, can actually go into this insane dark territory with the fact that this man's superhero or villain outfit essentially consists of all of the cut up hands of all of his family members. It is just freaky, to say the least. All for One has completely ruined this young child's life, and when you combine that with all the other things we learned about his backstory in the past of, you know, being related to the other previous members of One for All and everything, just wow. It is just ultimately super disturbing, and what a massive fall from grace for that character. But most of this episode is dedicated to Tomura and the League of Villains trying to take down Gigantomachia, and it's not going to be easy. They literally battle this guy from like October all the way through December, and he never seems to give up. He sleeps for like 3 hours at a time, and then every other time he's just completely fighting them, giving it his all, and they manage to not do anything. They literally have to take shifts to fight this guy. But what is interesting, however, is that Gigantomachia mostly goes after Tomura. It's really just his other team members that sort of like supplement him in the actual battle itself. But Gigantomachia really hates Tomura Shigaraki, as he feels that he's sort of like a weak successor to the powers of All for One. He doesn't feel that he's actually going to have the ability to use that power properly, or at least use it to the way that his previous master All for One actually did. And that leads him to basically just go on a rampage throughout the course of the entire episode as they battle against him. However, the best part of the episode definitely comes towards the end, when we are formally introduced to the Meta Liberation Army, which is led by a man who goes by the name of Re-Destro. He's a character that we've actually sort of seen in the shadows shadows in some of the previous episodes of this season, and you do get to see him in the intro. He's got a really long nose, he's really weird and creepy looking, and I've been wondering what this guy is going to be all about. I just figured he was going to be a new member of the League of Villains, but apparently he leads his very own villainous organization, which is a lot more shadowy and has been planning much more grandiose things than the actual League of Villains themselves. So while battling Gigantomachia and while he was taking a little bit of a nap, we get to see that they get a call from another member of the League of Villains who goes by the name of Giran, who has basically been missing for months, or at least he hasn't been calling the group, and suddenly he decides to call them up when we get to see that it's actually not him on the other line. It's this leader, Re-Destro, and they claim that they've actually kidnapped Giran, and essentially they're calling out the League of Villains at this point, and they've done it in the most, again, messed up way possible. If it wasn't the fact that we're learning a little bit more about Tomura and his weird hands, now we get to see that Giran's, like, fingers have all been cut off and spread around all these different places as essentially like a call sign and a warning to the League of Villains that, hey, challenge us or have the heroes kick your ass. That's basically what's going to go down here. And basically, it's a declaration of war between these two various groups. But what makes the Meta Liberation Army so scary is the fact that their forces are absolutely massive in the 100,000s, and they're spread out all across the world. It's basically a part of some giant plan that they have where they want to basically change the very infrastructure of the hero world, or they want people to be able to use their powers up to 100% without really any sort of problem at all. And while this does sort of go along a little bit with the League of Villains plans, there is a big difference in what they're actually trying to accomplish, with the League of Villains essentially being obsessed with destroying everything and being able to realize and idealize all of their personal hopes and dreams, with Tomura wanting to destroy everything, and then a character like Himiko Toga, who simply just wants to love. And she certainly has a lot of love to give. That bitch is crazy in this episode. But essentially, this is where Tomura comes up with this amazing plan where, you know, of course they're going to try and get Giran back, but this is going to be like a 1-2 punch. They're going to be able to utilize that special ability that the Doctor has to sort of like transport people with that weird black goo that comes out of their mouths and brings them to places. And basically what they're going to do, I think, is that his plan is he's going to bring Gigantomachia into like this big like city where they're going to battle against them. And since he's going after Tomura the entire time, all he has to do is sort of lead Gigantomachia around as he destroys everything in his wake and takes down people. But at the same time, this is also going to weaken Gigantomachia so that Tomura can take him down and essentially prove himself as the next successor of All for One. It's a crazy, convoluted, batshit crazy plan, but damn it, I freaking love it. I've said it before and I've said it again in many of my previous reviews. I love when the villains go up against other villains. It just makes for such a more interesting dynamic than the typical superhero taking down the bad guy kind of dynamic. And that's what I'm really excited to see here. And man, they're wasting no time in getting into it. They're just plowing ahead with this next major conflict in the series, and I can't wait to see what the Meta Liberation Army is going to be all about as they sort of slowly start to introduce some of the key members in this episode. We don't get any like big name drops aside from Re-Destro, the main leader of the group, but he seems to have a lot of followers who have very interesting designs. This one blue lady looks all sorts of freaking awesome, and I can't wait to see what Re-Destro is going to be able to do. I have no idea what his powers are actually going to entail, but he's a very striking and very crazy looking villain. I love the design of him with his giant nose and everything, and this dude has got some balls for calling out Tomura Shigaraki here. I love it how the League of Villains has always been sort of like this ragtag group of villains who from the beginning have just been sort of working their way up through the ranks, and they keep getting confronted by all of these other villainous groups, whether it was the Shiai Hasaikai or now we have the Meta Liberation Army here, and man, I just can't wait for more. So what's the rundown on this episode of My Hero Academia? Man, there was a lot to take in this episode, whether it was the backstory of Tomura, the creepy hands, the introduction of the crazy mad scientist doctor, who clearly is just as interesting a character as some of the other ones that we've seen. The fact that his lab is filled with all of these like brand new superpowered Nomu, again, that's just more promise for more of the crazy things that they're actually going to come up with. And you know, the League of Villains, while they seem like they're going to be completely outnumbered by the Meta Liberation Army, I can't say if they're going to be outclassed or not. It's hard to say. Like, with how insane the Mad Doctor is and his Gigantomachia and the fact that they're so devoted to All for One and how confident he is, you can see that there is potential for them to actually be one hell of a match for them. And also, I have to remember that a lot of this was actually teased very early on in the season, where we actually went back to that city where it was all completely destroyed, and you actually got to see Tomoe Shigaraki standing what looked like very victorious. So, like, we're basically going back in time here, and now it makes a lot of sense, because a lot of people who read the manga version have been telling me in the comments section that this has been sort of like messing with some of the you know, the order of how these arcs are actually going to play out, where they should have actually already shown this, but they haven't. And again, since I don't read the manga, I can't tell. And it's not really diminishing my excitement. If anything, it's got me even more excited to see what's actually going to be next for the series, as this one right here gave me everything that I've been really wanting to see from the next major part of the story, which is more time with the villains. And everybody sort of like gets their moment here. I mean, Tomura is the real star of the episode, but there's a lot of little moments from each of the characters which I really like Himiko Toga just re-emphasizing the fact that while she is basically a creepy Harley Quinn-esque character, her main motivation is simply the love of turning into people that she finds, whether they're people that she kills or not is kind of hard to say, but she still definitely has it out for Deku and even Ochako as well, which is pretty creepy. You get to see that Spinner is still very devoted to the whole Stain thing, still sort of emulating his overall style and ideologies. Freaking Twice is still just a really great character just for how insane he is, how whenever you take off his mask, he has the whole like split personality thing going where he starts to lose it. Just everybody had their moments, and Gigantomachia was also really awesome in this episode too. Again, they really are driving home the fact that this guy is just so freaking powerful, but he does have a key weakness, which I really love how Tomura actually brought it up in this episode. He says he's a really strong guy, but he's not invincible. He just has a lot of HP. You just gotta whittle down those health points just a little bit, and boom, you'll be able to conquer the big bastard. And then the Meta Liberation Army. The introduction of them in this episode was crazy for just the emphasis of the fact that they have such a massive force at their hands, and the fact that they're just so willing to go after the League of Villains like this with such bravado. But Tomura seems pretty, you know, confident that Gigantomachia is going to be able to take out a large member of their organization, so I can't wait to see that. I mean, basically the next episode looks like it's just going to be a promise of a lot of action to come and a lot of cool setups. I really hope a lot of the League of Villain members get more time to do stuff, and even Dobby in this episode was interesting, as he's going off to do his very own thing. I'm not sure what that's actually going to entail, but man, I just can't wait to see more of that Blue Fire guy. Basically, I'm just pumped for everything that's getting ready to happen in the next major arc of the series. So yeah, that's really all I have to say. I loved this episode. I'd go as far as to say it's my favorite of the season so far. It doesn't feature the best animation or action or anything, but the overall story has got me more excited than anything I think I've seen all season. It's just really interesting and different and refreshing. Getting to focus on the villains is always interesting, and now that we have an arc that's going to be entirely devoted to them without any of the heroes being involved is freaking awesome. I mean, that's something to speak about in this episode. This was a full-on villain episode for the series, and I don't remember if there's ever been one like that throughout all of My Hero Academia. So changing the name to My Villain Academia was very appropriate. So I'm really pumped for this next arc right here. I think it's going to be awesome and a great way to end this season. But I really want to hear from you guys. Make sure to sound off in the comment section below telling me what you thought about the latest episode of the series, what you think is going to happen in the big battle between the League of Villains and the Meta Liberation Army, which sort of fights you're looking forward to seeing, what Gigantomachia is going to do, and if Tomura is going to be able to take down this other giant Liberation Army. So there it is, my friends. Thank you for watching this review. I'll see you all next time, and as always, stay down there, baby.